The restoration of the 150-year-old Catholic Cathedral in Albany, New York began in 2001 because of the severe deterioration of its Portland sandstone, what's better known as brownstone, facades.
He said okay. Yep.
This building is a textbook example of what can happen when sandstone, a sedimentary stone naturally formed in horizontal layers, is face bedded. This means that the natural horizontal bedding planes end up in a vertical orientation once the stone is placed on the building. Every stonemason knows that face bedding should almost never be practiced, but it was often done in the northeast to make quarrying and fabrication easier. The result of this is that the building begins to exfoliate, or in other words, it delaminates and starts to become a safety hazard. Of course, this is good for future generations of stonemasons because it provides lots of restoration work. This was the case in Albany, after a piece of sandstone fell and just missed members of a wedding party on the cathedral steps. Of course, at this point, the cathedral's fabric committee realised there would have to either be a major restoration of the church, or it would have to be demolished. The architect decided that the north tower and spire and the clear stories of the nave and transepts would need almost 100% stone replacement. But the south tower could be stabilised by scaling off any loose stone and repointing the joints, as the stones on that spire were correctly bedded. What follows is a brief account of some of the later work on the north tower as it took place. As there weren't sufficient quantities of the original Portland brownstone available, the Restoration Committee searched for a suitable replacement stone throughout the US and Europe, and finally decided on St Bees sandstone from the UK. Most of the new stone was fabricated off-site in the UK, but it was obvious that there would have to be skilled stone cutters, known as banker masons, on site, so that they could make modifications if things didn't fit quite right, or to recut replacement pieces that were damaged in transit. This sparked off the idea for an apprentice program. 2 bricklayer apprentices, Jason Muscanel and Robert Piero, were chosen by the union because of the exceptional skills that they'd shown in the first years of their apprenticeship. In the original scope of work, the 4 existing clock faces and surrounds, which were made of wood tracery, were scheduled for repair. However, it was decided to replace them with stone instead of repairing the wood, and this stone would be cut by the apprentices and myself. There would be 6 months to train up the apprentices and complete the 48 stones needed for the clock surrounds. Field measurements were taken and then transferred to a full-size drawing from which templates for the clock stones were made. The basic wedge shape of each voussoir or arch stone was cut on a saw, and some of the waste stone also removed. And then the stones were loaded onto a banker. That's a mason's work table. And then marked up to be masoned. Before they could work on the clock stones, the apprentices had to spend 2 months learning stone cutting techniques on practice stones, just using hand tools. They also learned how to split slabs, When they were familiar with the hand tools, they were introduced to the power tools, which they were encouraged to use in order to save as much time as possible. Usually, apprentices would have much longer to train before taking on work at this skill level. But because of the time constraint, their training had to be intensified. Luckily, both Jason and Rob had very good hand skills, and they were able to pick up the processes quickly. The mallet, hammer and a large variety of chisels comprise the stonemason's hand toolkit. but these are used much less widely today, as power saws and grinders with diamond blades have taken over. Of course, they make the process much quicker. It's still worth learning the hand techniques though, because sometimes the right power tools aren't available for some reason, or you can't get power where you're working. This was the case here early on in the project. There wasn't a compressor, and the demo saws they did have were too cumbersome for any fine work. So it was still quicker to cut replacement stones with hand tools than to let the job come to a complete standstill while the stone setters were waiting for replacement stone. The first stones the apprentices had cut using only hand tools had taken 2 weeks. As they became more skilled, and by using the combination of hand and power tools, they were able to complete a stone in less than 2 days. When the clock stones were complete, they were put in the staging area with the rest of the stones ready to go up on the tower. Before any of the new stone could be installed, the old stone cladding had to be stripped from the brick structure behind. Most of the original brickwork was in fact stable enough to remain, and the new stone was attached to it. The new mortar used was imported from Germany in a mix specially designed to be compatible with the St. Bees stone. The apprentices also got the chance to set some of the stones they'd cut. It actually used to be customary for masons to learn to cut stone before being allowed to go building. Knowing how much effort and care went into cutting a stone would encourage the apprentice to handle the stones carefully on the building site.
Two best stone men in the capital district right here.
All the clock stones were pinned together with stainless steel dowels and also anchored back to the brick structure.
All right? Okay.
The clock faces on all 4 sides of the tower were built at the same time, and this was some of the trickiest installation work on the project, especially the upper half of the clock, which was in effect building an arch. The stones were really quite heavy, but at the same time very fragile, and to get them in place without damage could be very difficult. Usually when you're building an arch, you'd use centering, and that's a temporary wooden support in the shape of the underside of the arch. This stops the arch from falling until all the voussoirs are mortared or grouted in. Here a different technique was used. More difficult, but quicker if successful. The stones were temporarily wired back to the structure to hold them in place until the last 2 stones were in position. After all the clocks were in place, a relieving arch was placed above them to disperse some of the weight that bore directly on the clock moulding. The new hands and numerals for the clocks were gold-plated. And a piece of opaque glass formed the new clock faces. Some of the biggest stones on the job were the buttress caps. Hoisting and moving these large pieces around the scaffolding presented one of the biggest challenges to the crew.
Fulcrum? American Fulcrum. Accordion Fulcrum?
During the winter months, construction stopped to avoid the freezing temperatures, and this shutdown provided a window to dry set the first few courses of the spire to make sure it all fitted together. The base of the spire was the most complicated area of the job, as the four sides of the tower transitioned into the 8 facets of the spire. There was also a chance to make repairs and recut some of the pieces that were damaged in transit. Startup for the last stage of the project began early in spring 2004, with setting the base courses of the spire. The cavity between the stone facing and the brick structure was filled solid with mortar, grout and brick. Inside the brick core of the spire, a new steel structure had been erected to brace the masonry. Near the top of the spire, the brick core was discontinued, changing to load-bearing stone. A hole was left in the centre for a neoprene sleeve, which would house the steel rod to anchor the cross. And the top 8 rows were a single piece of stone each.
That's a bigger view.
Look at that stone. That's about a 500-600 pounder right there. What?
Good.
Here it comes. So they got the pins.
Yeah, if it doesn't center, we're gonna drop it off.
Lifting them up.
Sometimes you just gotta, it's like riding with Tracy.
You know what I meant.
What did you say, Andy?
Let her sit and leave a little tension in it. Good. Yeah.
Get Andy over
you
here.
see that? We haven't touched it with the mallet yet. Now watch this. You think that's something? Look at that.
One tap.
Tony in
oh,
action.
got her set. He wants to steal your thunder.
There's 3 more rolled stones down there. 3 more of these.
Yeah, that's right. Keep that. Tony pointing up.
That's keeping up here.
Yeah.
You ever seen an architect up this high?
I think once or twice.
The pinnacles at each corner of the spire were some of the last stones to be set. They were also secured with stainless steel rods and plates.
Come on down, Andy. Come on down, buddy.
Yeah, we're going to have the cross ceremony at 11 o'clock in the church. The bishop's going to bless the cross at 11 o'clock.
When we set the last stone, over 8,500 stones have been placed on this building, making it the largest restoration project, masonry restoration project in North America.
Of course, you can't finish a project like this without having a topping out ceremony. So in August 2004, the last stone, the finial for the spire, which was also cut at the site, was set.
See ya.
Yep. Perfectionist. Look at that.
Final stone is carved by Stephen Boyle
and Jason Muscatel, our apprentice. Amen.
Bravo. Thank you all.
At one point, they thought they were going to have to get masons outside of the capital district, maybe from another country, to do this project. And Local 2 believed right from the very beginning that we were capable and that we had the men. And we just had a couple missing elements, and it was people like Dave Graves who could come here and direct the project, and Stephen Boyle himself who could direct our apprentices at certain times. We're done.
Good. The end. Okay, boys. All the boys.
Goodbye. See you in Bavaria.
Okay.
Passau. In Bavaria, Europe.
We don't have any money. We're out of money, Steve. We're out of money.
We're gonna have Anderson vinyl window put in. Yeah. You know, them windows, they fit pretty nice. Plus, when they're on sale, you can save a couple of bucks.